All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Wednesday, January 16th. This is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. I'm Tanner Carlson. That is Jake Jimerson, and we are getting geared up and ready to go for the off season. And I believe the official class has been announced of who is declaring for the NFL from the Texas Longhorns. 19 players up to this point have declared, and maybe one or two stragglers, maybe, depending on what they decide to do. And we will get into that conversation here momentarily. And then we're going to take a look at what the 2025 roster looks like, give our opinions on what our early expectations are for that team. Now, obviously, that team is not decided yet. There's still transfer portal seasons to go through. There's still signings to get to, and flips and decommits, and who knows what else is going to happen in the offseason. Maybe not for Texas, but for other teams that Texas could possibly sign. We have a little bit of news on a former Texas Longhorn already off of his new team after about a month of signing with them. You probably have already heard the news about Jonte Cook and Washington. Rumor has it maybe Florida is who he's looking at. And so that would be just a perfect fit, in my opinion, in terms of just
Georgia would actually be the perfect
Georgia
fit.
might be the better fit. Yeah. And so we will take a deep dive into what the offseason kind of looks like for Texas and what these draft players and their capabilities of being drafted, where they're going to be drafted, where we view them in the NFL. And we'll have this conversation until the end of the episode. And it should be a good one. Jake, have you fully recovered from the Cotton Bowl game yet?
No. That
it might be a while.
A full recovery won't happen until probably after the national championship game.
You know, I'll be honest with you, a full recovery may not happen until I see Arch Manning take the field again.
Yeah, maybe till the spring game, or
Right.
at least until we know.
Until we have the full roster.
Yeah, I mean, and we're not going to have the full roster until after the spring portal.
Right.
Because I think Texas is going to be a lot more aggressive in the spring portal this year than they were last year. Just because that I think there weren't many guys who entered that they really wanted this year in the first portal. And now I think they're going to be probably trying a little bit harder, even if there's some guys they don't necessarily like desperately want. I imagine, especially, along the defensive tackle position, probably an experienced wide receiver. Depends what's happening with some of these Penn State guys who've entered that I'm sure Texas is going to go after. I imagine they're going to be very aggressive come that spring portal.
And Jake, Quinn Ewers did officially declare for the NFL draft, along with 18 of his teammates, the likes of that include Kelvin Banks, Cam Williams, Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden. That's all in the offense right there. Andrew Makuba, John A. Barron, Thorpe Award winner, Gunnar Helm, another key weapon on the offense. Guys like Alfred Collins, Vernon Broughton, Jake Majors, Barron Sorrell, Jaden Blue, Hayden Connor, Bill Norton, David Binda, Gavin Holmes, Mo Blackwell, and Velton Gardner. Jake, a couple of surprises on that list to me anyway. That was definitely towards the bottom of that list. But, man, just looking at the talent that is leaving this team going into next year, it's impressive. But I did want to just leave this off with saying, Quinn Ewers, thank you. You left Texas better than you found it. We appreciate everything that you did for Texas as a player and as a person. The growth that I saw from you as a senior in high school, which you forego and went to Ohio State, then committed to Texas, and then grew up to be the man that you were and are today, and your faith in God and never being shy of expressing who you are as a person off the football field. I think that's what the guys in the locker room look up to, is the type of maturity that he holds and the type of standards he holds himself to as a man, not just a football player. And so he was integral in changing the culture of this Texas Longhorn locker room.
He made the locker room a more mature locker room, without a doubt. First off, you can just hear that in the press conferences of players and how they talk about Quinn and how he changed their outlook on things, or whether he brought God in their life or whatever it was. And not only that, but for me, all I have to hear is how all of the players who have played around Quinn talk about Quinn. That means more than what any fan posting on X or any criticism that we've brought up about him at times during the season with frustrations, or anyone else has brought towards him. Matthew Golden, tweeting out today, what an honor it was to play with Quinn for a
Right.
year. And, that's a guy who came in for 1 year with Quinn. That tells me everything I need to know about Quinn Ewers as not only a player, but a leader. And like you said, he came to Texas coming off a 5-7 season. He leaves Texas with 2 back-to-back Final Four seasons. That
Yep. So it tells you everything you need to know.
He's a winner. He never lost to an unranked team. And I've seen some people going, well, that's good. It's Texas. We shouldn't. How quickly you forget. That's all I can say to those people. How quickly you forget. Also, how quickly you forget. It's normal for good teams to lose to unranked teams. Upsets happen all the time in college football. Those were not happening with Quinn there. Any games they lost were to highly ranked teams for the most part.
BYU, Maryland, Baylor, Oklahoma State, Kansas,
TCU, over
TCU,
and over and over and
K-State.
over
again. Countless times Texas has lost conference, non-conference games to unranked opponents when ranked or when just favored going into it. Quinn, never happened to him, not one time. And so I can only appreciate that level of consistency, and especially at the college football level. Now, did he bring us to the promised land? No, but he put us on the map, damn it. And that's just where we wanted to get to at this point. And again, you and I have talked about it. We're at the dawn of the Sark era. We were at the very beginning. We were very low on the tip of the iceberg, because it gets larger underwater or whatever. It's much more body of work under there. Anyway, the point being is that we have not seen the full picture of what this Texas Longhorn football program is going to be under Steve Sarkisian yet.
No, and that doesn't mean there won't be hitches and little bumps along the road. I'm sure there will be. I mean, they're replacing a lot of guys this year. 2025 is going to be interesting to see who all rolls out, but I have no doubt that they'll at least be in playoff contention again. And I've been on record multiple times saying that I have already picked the Longhorns to win a national championship in 2026. And I'm going to stand by that as long as Sarkisian is the head coach at Texas. And as long as, the presumed Arch Manning returning happens as well, which I'm pretty confident it will.
All right, Jake. So speaking of the NFL draft and players who have declared, we talked about the 19 players who have entered their name into the NFL draft and declared their eligibility to get drafted by the NFL. Jake, the record for a team to have the number of players drafted in a single NFL draft came in 2022 with Georgia, with 15 of their players following their national championship year. Ohio State did it in 2004 with 14. LSU in 2020 also with 14. Texas is on that list with 11 back last year. In 2024, that was the most of any Texas team, having 11 players drafted. Looking at our list, so we have decided that we're going to just give not an official draft grade, but this is a very early, just postseason draft grade of where we think that these list of players might fall into the draft. Jake, I've got about 12, 13 players-ish in the range of getting drafted this year from the 19 who have declared for Texas. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number could be anywhere from 12 to 15 on the higher end, because of just there's several guys who very likely could get taken in later rounds that weren't necessarily starters on this team, but a Bill Norton could get taken late, a Gavin Holmes, just to name two names, two guys that weren't necessarily starters on this year teams, but are the type of players that NFL scouts look to bring in and develop and have as rotational guys in areas that are pretty thin in draft boards and just in the NFL in general. Defensive linemen, corners are just something you need a lot of.
It's so many get drafted in a season where you get guys like, you're like, who is so-and-so from Mississippi State Valley Division III football getting drafted in the 5th round? And, who players like that pop up all the time, right? And so
Yeah.
I do want to make it clear, Jake, when you and I talk about the draft, it's not necessarily, oh, well, Keelan Robinson got drafted in the 5th round, and Jaden Blue is a better player than Keelan Robinson, so that means Jaden Blue is going to get drafted, and he's going to get drafted higher than Keelan Robinson. It's not necessarily how the draft works. There are skill sets, there are positional values that change on a year-to-year basis, and also the draft class within that position changes every year. Sometimes it's deeper, sometimes it's not as deep. You and I, we're going to get very much into the draft, but I think it's very important to let people know kind of where we stand on how we kind of evaluate players going into the draft. There are certain traits and skill sets that players possess that other players don't, that translate better to the NFL than it did in college, or within the scheme in the NFL. Maybe a GM or a head coach likes one player's skill sets better than Steve Sarkisian could utilize it in his own system. That doesn't mean that that player doesn't possess those skill sets to get drafted in the NFL. It just, there's a very finicky game between NFL, college game, are very different games. And sometimes you have to separate the two to find yourself in the draft.
Yeah. And also when we go through these, very preliminary.
Yeah,
Very
absolutely.
preliminary, have not done any mock drafting, or I mean, I've done some mock drafting, but
I haven't looked at the classes or anything like that.
I haven't looked at,
the
I'm
positions.
aware of certain positions, who's coming out, what it kind of looks like. And I'll give, a little reasoning or what my thought process is and what I put there. There may be some where I say a range I have them in and go, I actually don't think they should be in this range, but here's why I have them right there, or, and so forth. I put a little reasoning behind it, but very preliminary, very much a rough draft, but just kind of fun to do because it's fun to talk about so many guys going to the NFL from Texas for a 2nd straight year in a row, by the way, because don't forget, everyone last year was like, Texas losing too much, they won't be good next year. And then they were better this year than last year. Yep. And I'm not saying next year they'll be better than they were this year, because they are losing almost their entire offensive line. But they're going to be, it's a reload, not a rebuild. A rebuild season feels like it's still going to be like 9 to 10 wins at worst right now.
And that's
the way this program is set up.
That to me goes to our conversation of Texas is back, because if that is your conversation piece for, what we talked about in yesterday's episode was how do you define is Texas back? Texas is back by, if you're having a rebuild year and it's a 10-win season, yeah, that means you're a top-notch college football program in the likes of Alabama, where you're distraught over a 4-loss season and with a bowl loss, or an Oklahoma that barely made it bowl eligible and then loses to Navy. That's more so where Texas was at. We are now at a point to where, not making the 12-team playoff is going to seem like a down year, a very down year for Texas.
Yeah, it feels like they're going to be consistently, on a rebuild year, it's going to be like a top 20 team still at worst. That's what, and maybe that won't be true. Maybe there'll be a year they have a death schedule and it goes a little worse, or injuries. There's things that can happen, but just from a pure roster building standpoint, also next year's team is going to be ridiculously young. So next year is like, if you want to beat Texas, next year's the year to do it, because they're only going to get better in 2026. And honestly, from that point on, they're going to be in a very good situation to just continue to reload just at an unreal rate, which I already think they're getting to that point. But it seems like next year is going to be the only year where it's going to be like, okay, there is a lot of unproven at very important positions. That's kind of an odd one, losing 4 out of your 5 starting offensive linemen, things like that.
Yeah.
But what a good spot for this program to be in, that when you're losing that still, you still feel like there's a pretty damn good chance they're going to be a playoff team.
All right, let's get into it then, Jake. We'll go ahead and start giving our draft grades. I'll go one player at a time, and if you want to elaborate on how you kind of feel about it, then we can. If not, we'll just kind of give the grade, say, this is kind of a little bit of why, and then we'll move on to the next one. But starting with Kelvin Banks, Jake, I think he is the most highly touted prospect coming off of this roster, and I've got a minimum I typically go based on my grades on where is the furthest down you could see him get drafted in terms of a steal. And I think a top 10 pick, if you're a Chicago Bears and you're at number 9 or number 10, wherever they're at, and Kelvin Banks falls to you, you absolutely 100% take that pick. And so, yeah, I have him as a top 10 pick, the top 5 talent.
Yeah, I don't give a damn that he might fall out of the top 5. I'm putting top 5 because he absolutely should go in the top 5. But we know teams get quarterback hungry. Maybe a pass rusher. That's one that also
Abdul Carter.
teams will. Yeah,
Yep.
well, Abdul Carter going above Banks, I wouldn't be just like offended by, but there may be a player or two that gets taken ahead of him that I am offended by.
What about a
I'll say
Jalen
that
Walker?
now.
What if Jalen Walker got drafted ahead of him?
I
from
would
Georgia?
take I would take Banks ahead of him, but
All right.
these
conversations will be
not
had
one
later. Yeah.
that's not one I would be offended by. But for me, Banks is a top five, at worst top 7. That's the worst I would go. If he goes towards the bottom of the top 10, some teams screwed up. I'll just put it that way.
Cam Williams, Jake.
First to second, I don't think he should go in the first. And that's no disrespect to Cam. He is a raw prospect. I honestly think he needed another year in college. But the fact that scouts are telling him he's going to go more than likely in the first round, you can't not leave when you're getting told that. That is too much money to turn down.
My grade will likely change in terms of on the back end of it. I could see him falling as far as the 3rd round. And I think that's kind of where he is. I think that's where he is on a talent perspective right now, though. Coming off the field, I think he's maybe a third round guy. That's where I'd be comfortable if my team took him, would be the 3rd round. But in terms of the intangibles, the high ceiling, low floor type prospect that is going to be in that 1st round, 2nd round grade. I think he is probably, for me, evaluated as a 3rd round talent. Those two things are completely different because sometimes you look at potential and you put that ahead of where the player is currently. But Jake, I could see some of his issues in terms of his discipline on the offensive line when it comes to holding penalties, when it comes to false starts, when it comes to lunging and kind of, giving up some of those fundamental things. I know those are coachable attributes, but I could see that hurting him at some point in time. But he does have all the measurables that an NFL scout wants to see in an NFL tackle. Cam Williams has.
I will challenge you on. I think he is a 1st round talent. I don't think his film is a 1st round draftable player now.
And maybe that's what I was trying to say.
It is going to, but I cannot see him falling out of the top of the 2nd round. He wouldn't be leaving Texas if there was any risk of that, unless he just bombs out at the combine.
Right. I want to see his pro day. I want to see his pro day, and I want to see his combine numbers.
I've seen him mocked as high as, in the few mocks I've looked at, I've seen him as high as 12.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't see him falling out of the 1st.
Yeah. All right. The quarterback, Quinn Ewers, Jake. That's going to be the big question.
So this is not necessarily my grade on Quinn, or where I would take him if I was drafting. I wouldn't draft him until later on because I think there's too much work to be done there. That if Sarkisian couldn't do it in his time, I have a hard time believing I'm going to be able to magically fix his pocket presence and footwork that could be killer in the NFL. Just sink a career. I think he's going to go between the 1st and the 3rd round. I could see him going up to the 1st. You know why? He's going to have a great pro day. Johnny Manziel talked himself up into the 1st round. Paxton Lynch got himself up to the 1st round. Quinn Ewers looks great in shorts, and he throws a great ball. And he's going to throw some great balls at his pro day, at the combine. And teams are going to look at his tape, look at his stats, look at his winning success at every level he's played at. And this is not a very great or deep quarterback class. I think there's an argument to be made for him to be the 3rd best quarterback in the class. And you can't tell me at least 3 to 5 QBs are not going in the 1st round. So it's not impossible. And then at worst, I think he would go, top to middle of the 2nd round. Even though that's not necessarily where I would take him, the furthest I could see him going is the 3rd.
Yeah, Jake, I've got 2nd to 4th round on him. I don't know if after this last year, whenever you really dive into the tape, that NFL coaches and GMs are just going to say, we got to get this guy in the first. We can't pass up on him because he may not be there in the second. And if that's the possibility, I think that just pushes his grade back at least another round. So you had a first, third. I've got a second, fourth on him. I'm when I say fourth, I'm talking the first pick in the fourth round, like very early on to a purgatory team like the Jets or to the Browns or somewhere where they're going to be quarterback hungry at that point in time if they don't draft one in the first couple of rounds. So I think he played himself into a third round pick personally. That's where I'd be comfortable picking him at this point in time. But for all the things that you said, yes, agreed with. He can play himself in shorts up to a first round pick. I do agree with that. Isaiah Bond, Matthew Golden, Jake, we'll just do both of these at the same time.
Yeah, Bond is a really interesting one, right? Because I think teams will probably reach, but I still put third to fifth on him. I get the speed is enticing, and he did look good at Texas the first half of the season. There's a lot of blocking issues there. There's effort issues at time.
Yeah.
There's drop issues. And I don't know if there's off the field or locker room issues with him. But there definitely seem to be issues at Texas down, the latter half of the season. He was benched against Ohio State. While all we know is that he was pretty to fully healthy. And I think that stuff could catch up to him. His combine will probably end up getting him a lot higher. But this is one where I went with personally where I would have him. And that is between the third to fifth round.
I have a very wide range on him. I could see him going as high as early second to as low as middle to late fifth round, depending on where scouts and GMs and coaches want to deal with him as the player, because I think he has a lot of work to do. His routes are not very crisp at the NFL level. At the college level, yes, they are. At the NFL level, his route running is not Xavier Worthy like route running. It's just not. He has speed, don't get me wrong, but it's not the crisp, precise route running that's going to free yourself up with that speed. And I think that's whenever you fall into that trap of, is this guy a John Ross or is this guy Tyreek Hill, like with the speed? And so, where are we at on the spectrum with him? I think he's going to have a very wide range of prospects, whether, like I said, early second, late fifth. And with Matthew Golden, Jake, I think he's a better prospect.
Golden.
No, that's fine. No, I thought you were just going to rebound back to it after I got done. I think with Matthew Golden, Jake, I think he's a better prospect. I think he has a lower floor or a higher floor than Isaiah Bond. Matthew Golden has all the attributes that you want for an NFL wide receiver. In fact, I would take him personally over Isaiah Bond. If I was an NFL GM drafting a wide receiver, I'd have him ranked above Bond. And so I would think, a high second round, low third round pick for Matthew Golden is where he's going to find himself. Probably in the second round is where I would have him.
Yeah, I didn't even put a range here. I put second round. I don't think it's crazy that he could go late in the first, because I'm already seeing draft experts. I think Dane Brugler's one of them, who I like to look at his stuff because he's pretty well educated on the draft and where he puts players. And as these scouts are starting to look in his film at Texas, they're going, this is the big riser on my board. Like, he is now a top 50 guy on my board. And that's just at the start. And I imagine he's going to have a good combine. He's going to have a good pro day. It might not be the craziest numbers, but a good to solid day on those, and combined with his film, I have a hard time seeing him fall out of the second round. Not that it couldn't happen. Teams are stupid and they may go, well, he didn't run a 4.2. I don't really care when the tape speaks for itself, and his tape speaks for itself.
Yeah. Andrew Makuba, Jake, I've got a second round grade on. I think the safety position gets overlooked. However, I do think the second round is where teams like to push for a safety. I think that safety, that your top end safeties. And now this is going to say, for me, I don't think there's a safety that's going to get drafted in the first round. So to say that Andrew Makuba might get drafted in the mid to late second round, I think it's very possible that he might be one of the top 2-3 safeties off the board in this year's draft, whether that be mid to late second, going early in the third. But I think that's where I would like to have him, in the middle of the second round.
Yeah, I honestly think Makuba had first round tape this year.
He was fantastic.
Like you said, safety position is, I think, very overlooked, very underappreciated in football. maybe one of the most underappreciated positions right now, honestly, especially
you,
with today's game.
they're kind of like kickers. When you have a bad one, you notice a lot more than when you have a good one.
Yeah. But yeah, I have a second on him. I think he could fall to the third just because of that safety underappreciation. And I know he had some injury issues at Clemson, but I think when people turn on that tape from the senior season, he's a guy that could be rising really quickly, like a Matthew Golden.
Jahdae Barron, Jake.
First round grade. He's got position flexibility. He won the Thorpe Award. He was the best corner in college football this season. In that position flexibility as well is a big thing in the NFL. He came back to Texas to increase his draft grade, and I think he made a lot of money doing it.
Yeah, I've got a first round grade. Now, if he does fall, I wouldn't be necessarily surprised if it was very early second round, within the first 5 picks of the second round.
A lot of teams will regret that.
Yeah. No, yeah. It happens all the time, Jake. But yeah, I mean, Trayvon Diggs fell to the second round of the Dallas Cowboys, and Dallas benefited reaped the benefits of that drop. So that's just a position where I think corner is such a position where it's a lot like wide receiver. It's a lot like running back. What traits do you like? What traits fits well in this scheme? Where does this player fit with what I'm trying to do as a head coach? And so where Jahdae Barron falls in that category with some of these teams mid to late round in the first round will be very interesting to me. But I could see him going to like the Chiefs and just being really freaking good, is kind of where I can see that happening. All right, Gunnar Helm, Jake, tight end.
Yeah, I got a second to fourth. I think second is probably unlikely to happen, even though I think his tape would say that, just because his numbers sputtered out a little bit towards the end of the year. But he had a really solid season. He's a decent blocker, not a great blocker, but a decent blocker. And I think he's one that when teams start to dive into the film, they're going to really like. And maybe a team could come up into the second and get him. I think third to fourth round is probably most likely.
When you draft a guy like Gunnar Helm in the third round, as a fan, you're going to go back and watch some of his tape, and you're going to say, "Damn, we got a steal." But I think that's where he's going to go. I think tight end is one of those positions where you're either going to overreach or you're going to get a steal and get somebody who was undervalued at a later position. And so it always seems like it's one or the other. And so I think Gunnar Helm falls in that. I'm going to slip through some of the cracks, but not all of them. And then when when you go back and watch my film, whenever I get drafted in late second, early third, you're going to say, "Ooh, yeah, I like this guy. He was a good pick for us." So, Jake, let's go 2 defensive tackles, Alfred Collins, Vernon Broughton. Who do you like more in terms of the NFL?
It's really tough because these guys, I mean, they both flashed. They both had their games where they took over. I think they're kind of similar.
To Murphy and Sweat. I thought they were in terms of the draft grade, not in terms of the skill sets or anything, but in terms of who do you like? Me personally, I like Tavondre Sweat coming out of going into the NFL draft more so than I like Byron Murphy. Byron Murphy got drafted ahead of Sweat, but I think you could kind of flip a coin with either one of these guys.
Yeah. So for Collins, I have a third round grade. For Broughton, I have a third to fourth round. I don't think it's impossible for that to go up. I just kind of put it there for now because I kind of want to see what people are saying about them, where they're kind of projecting them. Also, I kind of want to go back and watch both of their games throughout the season and just kind of watch. I maybe like Broughton a tiny bit more. But not
I like Collins'
much.
size. I like
Collins' size. It allows you for some flexibility where you can put him on the line. I think Broughton is a little less flexible, but I think both of these guys have a good chance to be really solid pros. At worst, really good rotational guys, if not starters that are, anchors for your defensive line.
I've got Collins with a little bit higher of a ceiling, but I've got the floor about the same for both players. I don't think they drop off any further down past the late fourth round, in maybe going into the fifth round, depending on, again, a lot of this depends on what the defensive tackle class looks like. I'm not entirely sure what the class looks like. They might be
fifth round would be such a steal for either of these guys.
For both of those guys, it would be a huge steal. I think if you get Alfred Collins in the third round, I'd be like, that's a good pick. That's a good value pick for Alfred Collins in the 3rd round. I would be okay with that for any team in the NFL to come away with that. So, but again, if you see them fall in the 5th round, I think they got incredible value there. I think that's low floor type talk there. Get to some of the offensive linemen, Jake. Jake Majors, Hayden Connor, those 2 guys. So we've gone through the 4 starting offensive linemen that are looking to get drafted this year.
Yeah, Jake Majors is the guy that's going to be underappreciated because of his size. But I think he could be a serviceable starter in the NFL. It wouldn't surprise me with him. But with that said, I have a 5th to 7th. I think he will be drafted. I'm pretty confident that he will be drafted. But I think it'll be a later pick. Probably in centers get underappreciated. That's kind of a underlooked position at the NFL level. But I think his intangibles, he's going to interview well with teams. His tape is very solid to very, very, very good at times. And now he has tape against top competition that's really good as well. He improved every single year he was at Texas. And so I think that 5th to 7th round is probably where he goes. The 5th round, I wouldn't be surprised if that's where he ends up going, is middle of the 5th.
Yeah. And Hayden Connor?
Hayden Connor, I have 6 to undrafted. He is a 4-year starter, I believe, at Texas. He did have his best season this year, and I think that's going to help him. I have 6 to undrafted. I don't think it's impossible for this one to go up, and I do think more likely than not he will be drafted. It just kind of depends how pro day shakes out and kind of how scouts are seeing him.
It's also, interior offensive linemen just aren't highly valued in the draft. You always feel like you can kind of wait, kind of play the field out. But once a couple of them start rolling, that's whenever all the teams start jumping on them. And that's around the 3rd, 5th round. So if you don't get in within that sweet spot, then teams are just kind of taking a chance on you towards the end of the back end of the draft. But I've got for Hayden Connor and Jake Majors, I both have 6th round to undrafted guys for the offensive line. Going to Baron Sorrell on the defensive line, Jake.
Yeah, I think around the 5th round is most likely for him.
I agree.
Another guy who improved every single year he was at Texas, just had his best season. He is a guy who I'm confident is going to be a pretty good player on Sundays. He's not going to be a sack leader or anything like that. He's going to be like he was at Texas. He's going to do a lot of dirty work that's going to go underappreciated by fans, but not underappreciated by a coaching staff and by a general manager. And be a guy who's stopping the run well, has a games where he does get a handful of sacks, and definitely gets enough sacks to make you happy. But I think he's a very good all around edge player. And I think 4th round isn't even impossible, but I felt most comfortable with saying around that 5th round. And then maybe he could fall further than that, but I think even at the 5th round, he's a pretty damn good pick.
Yeah, I would agree, Jake. I like the 5th round grade on him. That's kind of where I would take him. Again, would I be shocked if I saw him get picked later in the 6th round, approaching the 7th round? Sure, but I do think he gets drafted. Like, he is a drafted player.
He has an NFL body too. It's not like he's undersized. He just doesn't have a plethora of sacks, but everything else is there.
Yeah, I like his body work. I also think he's a workhorse, and he's only going to try to. He's going to see. Coaches are going to see him work out, and they're going to fall in love with him. Is kind of my overall, synopsis on him. Jaden Blue, Jake, I think there's a lot of conversation revolving Jaden Blue kind of towards the back end of the draft. I think, would I be shocked if he went in the 4th round? I don't think so. Would I be shocked if he went in the 7th round? I don't really think so. Where are coaches and scouts going to see him in terms of when you're looking at a later in running back? Special teams, pass protection, fundamentals. It's not necessarily how just, talented you are at being an every down back, but can you be a rotation guy, a team guy? Do you have a place on my special teams unit? And can you do all the nitty gritty work on passing downs?
Yeah, which is why I have him at a 6th to 7th round. His pass pro isn't great. It's not awful, but it's definitely not great. I think the thing that NFL teams will like most about him, and the only thing that could get him drafted higher than what I'm saying, is his ability to catch out of the backfield
Mhm.
and make plays in the passing game, and just big play ability and just kind of the speed and the traits. I do think the ball security is going to be a big issue in the eyes of scouts and coaches, as it should be. Uh, I think he could have used another year in college. I don't think he was going to be a feature back for Texas. And if he is coming back, that's what he wanted. So he probably felt like this was his best chance to go ahead and just get in the NFL and then go from there. But I could see him going higher than it, but I put a 6th to 7th on him.
It would be 3 straight years that Tashard Choice has gotten 5 running backs drafted.
He will be drafted.
And
I think without a doubt he will be drafted.
And I do agree with that statement as well. Where? That's a whole nother conversation. All right, Jake, let's go down real quickly of kind of these bottom tier guys. And in my opinion, the guys that I'm about to name off could all be undrafted, likely to be undrafted. If nothing else, maybe a very low 6th round to a 7th round pick. And again, once you get to the 6th, 7th round, guys, it's kind of a toss up. You don't really know who's going. Even experts are like, I've never even heard of this guy. You'll go, watching day 3 of the NFL draft, and you'll be getting some guys getting drafted, and they're like, I didn't even scout this guy from the experts on TV talking about it. So 6th, 7th rounds are just kind of toss up guys. For me, these are undrafted to, very late round draft picks. Defensive tackle Bill Norton, linebacker David Binda, defensive back Gavin Holmes, linebacker Mo Blackwell, and running back Velton Garner. Velton Garner and Mo Blackwell, I don't think get drafted.
Yeah, I think Bill Norton more than likely goes in the 6th or 7th round because he is a run-stopping defensive tackle you can rotate in, and that is valuable.
And he's got NFL size and strength already day one.
Yes, and now he has film against top level talent, and I think that will help him. David Binda I have as undrafted. Gavin Holmes I do think will get taken 6th or 7th round. He has effective tape, and if you're a scout, you look at it and go, well, he was behind Barron and Manny Muhammad, who both had very good years. Barron had an incredible year. Manny Muhammad had a very good year, even though, yes, he wasn't great at times in the playoffs. He was good against Ohio State, by the way.
Yeah, he was.
But he
Played a
was
good game.
very good the whole regular season. And then Mo Blackwell and Velton Gardner. I would be surprised if either of them got drafted. Those will be guys who do get a chance. All these guys will get chances at NFL rosters. But I think out of that group, Norton and Holmes are the most likely to get drafted.
All 32 teams going to Texas Pro Day?
Yes.
I would also agree with that. Yeah, with 19 players in almost every single position.
And guys that are going to be going spread out through the draft. They're going to want to see Matthew Golden. A lot of teams are going to want to see Quinn Ewers. I'm telling you, it would not shock me if he goes top 15 in the draft. It just wouldn't.
Yeah.
Paxton Lynch got taken in the got people trading for him in the 1st round.
It takes one GM. It takes one head coach.
Yes.
That's all it takes. It takes one of those two guys.
Fix him.
I can fix him, and I love him, and I want him.
And with him, you don't even feel like there's that much to fix. The arm talent's there. The arm talent is there because the deep balls isn't an arm talent issue. It's a footwork. It's all related to his footwork and his pocket presence. And if you feel like you can bring him in and fix that, maybe sit him per year, work on that, he certainly could be a franchise quarterback. And wouldn't it surprise me if Quinn proved everyone wrong, and he is. Yeah. He just needs the right situation. But I guarantee there's going to be some GMs and some scouts that drool over him when he's throwing it at a pro day.
Jake, final tally. I think I've got about 11 to 13 guys that I could see realistically that I can stamp going to get drafted for this team. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I got 13 being drafted.
Yeah.
I feel confident about 13.
Yeah,
And I could see it upwards to 15.
I could.
I feel good about 13.
Right. Yep. I would agree with you. I'm kind of within that range too. Now, if some guys slip through the cracks, that happens in the NFL draft. I'm not going to be upset about it. But undrafted guys are going to, they're going to be really good undrafted players if they do get picked up by rosters for training camp. So, Jake, let's go ahead, wrap up this episode. I know we've got more. We're going to talk about the 2005 roster. We're already pushing 40 minutes. Let's go ahead, cut this one off. We'll talk about it in tomorrow's episode, and we'll kind of dive into that because we don't have as many talking points going into Friday and Saturday as we would normally going into a game week. Well, there's no game to be played. So for Jake Jimerson, I'm Tanner Carlson. This is your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns right here on All In Horns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, like, share, and subscribe, and hook 'em.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.